It's going to fly into this area right here, and it's going to sense that it's in trouble. Well, it kicks back to the left. That would have been done day, game over with the Neo. So the battle of the small selfie autonomously flying drone is certainly heating up with the launch of the DJI Neo versus the launches from the folks at 00 Robotics, the Hover Air X1 Pro, and the Hover Air X1 Pro Max. Now, one of the issues, especially with the Hover Air X1 Pro Max, is we don't have a whole lot of example footage. And most of the footage that we're seeing, well, that's coming directly out of the manufacturer itself. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't really instill confidence, but I get it. It's not launched until October 31st. But apparently there's one gentleman out there that I'm a bit sus of that does have some example footage that he posted to his YouTube channel that we will take a look at, because overall I think with the combination it's going to give us a great idea of truly the quality coming out of the Hover Air X1 Max. However, before we go on, I want to let you know that if you are in the market, I did put together a pretty detailed side-by-side comparison video that I dropped a few days ago. Now that's linked down below, and I encourage you to view it, especially if you're on the fence in terms of which model is right for you. But if you don't have time, well, let's quickly go over the differences that I found between the Neo and in particular the Hover Air X1 Pro. And the reason I say between those two models is because I don't think it's fair to actually compare the Neo to the Max. And the reason for that, well, the Max carries a 1/1.3 inch sensor. So with having such a great sensor, I think you're more likely to compare it to something like a Mavic, even though they're quite different. But in terms of what the quality of the video that's coming out of them, well, I think it's comparable to the Mavic. So it wouldn't be fair to actually compare the Neo to something like the Max. So instead, let's concentrate on the Neo versus the Pro. Now, both of them carry a 1/2 inch sensor. But just because they have the same size sensor doesn't mean they carry the same specs. In fact, the DJI Neo is going to be capped at shooting at 4K 30 frames per second, 1080 60, where the Pro is going to shoot at 4K 60 frames per second, 1080 120. So if you're looking at something for slow motion, well, I think the choice is pretty obvious. However, the differences don't stop there. And in fact, if you take a look at some of the DJI footage that's out there in the wild right now, especially from some trusted, honest reviewers, well, I think you'll notice a couple things. One, it crashes a lot. And the reason it crashes a lot is because it doesn't have any type of onboard obstacle avoidance, whereas both of the Hover models do. And because of that, it does crash a lot. Everyone I've seen has had basically a crash reel at the end of their videos, which to me says that you're going to experience the same thing. And although it seems pretty durable, I do think after the 40th, 50th crash, you may run into some problems. So it is really nice and a huge win that the Hover series has obstacle avoidance. In the same type of vein, I also noticed on those videos of the DJI Neo that it was losing tracking of the subject. Now that's a huge issue as well, and one of the reasons for that is because of speed. You see, the DJI Neo is only going to track you up to about 40 kilometers per hour, whereas the Hover series, well, they're going to be able to track you up to 60 kilometers per hour. So if you're on a bike, doing mountain biking, road biking, even some limited moto sports, you can rest assured that you're going to outpace the Neo well before you will any of the Hover series. So that's a huge issue. The other thing too with the tracking and losing the focus, well, that's not going to really happen, especially if you add on a piece called a beacon to your Hover drone. Now this is just a small transmitter that you can place on the person or the object you're tracking, and basically it's going to allow better connectivity, so you're going to be able to get a whole lot better tracking if you're doing anything like dollies or follows. But the DJI has a few positives over the Hover series in my opinion. First is price. The drone all the way down to all the accessories are ridiculously inexpensive as compared to the Hover. In fact, the DJI Neo, as it stands alone, it is over half the cost of that of the Pro. So if you're on a budget, I think the choice is clear. Now, one of the things that you can either see as a positive or negative is the fact that DJI does allow you to hook up the DJI goggles. This will give you basically FPV flight. But unfortunately, I view this more as a novelty than actually really truly experiencing any type of FPV flying. And in fact, if you're looking at getting into FPV flying, I would save up and just spend a little bit more money and get something like the DJI Avata 1 or 2. It's going to give you way more power, a true FPV flying experience, and you're not going to outgrow it as fast as you would the Neo. I think the Neo is a novelty, more like a toy getting you into FPV, but you will outpace it probably in the first week. And the reason for that is because the DJI drone in the Neo, it is super underpowered and super lightweight. So because of that, it's going to get blown around a lot, and you're going to see drift, and it's gonna be hard to shoot things like gaps. And because it's underpowered, well, you can't really effectively pull off barrel rolls and flips. You can do them, but it definitely does struggle. And if there's any type of wind, good luck to you. The other thing that the Avata has over the Neo is the fact that it shoots in 4K 60. So I think it would be well worth saving up the extra couple bucks. You can get it used with the controller and the goggles for $659. So I think you'll be way more happy if you're looking at this as an FPV drone. Okay, with that out of the way, and look, you probably didn't come here for that, but you got it anyways. And I think it's good to hear, right? Because when you're spending your hard-earned money, you want to make sure you're spending it on the right thing. Now, I don't have any of the pro footage right now. It'll be linked down below. I don't want to go over it. More so, I want to answer some of the questions that I've got about the Max, because this is really expensive. So if you're getting ready to drop this type of money on a drone, well, you probably want to see some of the footage it produces, right? So let's do that right now in the first video. Now, this is going to be shot 8K footage, 30 frames per second. Let's take a look at what this looks like. I mean, right away, my commentary is on color. When I see this as compared to something like the DJI Neo, it's not over sharpened. It's certainly not oversaturated, and it looks really, really good. Water's a big thing to me. I don't know exactly where they're at, but it looks pretty high up. It looks like areas I've been to, so that's probably a good representation of the water. Skies are always difficult. I like to look towards the cloud, as you see that kind of glancing off there to the left. It still does give some depth. Now, I don't know if they're using any type of ND filters here, but it is really impressive. The other thing I'll notice is the fact that the motion blur actually looks pretty dang good. And now that I'm seeing them walk up high, this is an environment that I am very immensely familiar with, and I can tell you it is really hard to shoot, especially on sunny days when you have so much white involved. And I think this camera actually does a really phenomenal job in terms of that color. The motion blur is spot on. If you look at the Neo, it's very jaggy, if that's even a word, jaggy, but you know, jittery. This thing looks like it's doing a whole lot better. The sky looks good gradient in the sky, definitely good texture in the mountains there. And overall, especially with all that white, I can say the white balance does a pretty dang good job. Again, temper this, it's coming out of the company itself, and we don't know any of the settings they used, but it is a good time to mention about that motion blur. Look, man, that motion blur is an issue on the other side of the coin with the DJI, and the reason for that is because you cannot do automatic exposure when you are using something like the autonomous flight. It isn't until you hook up the DJI controller, which is a little bit extra of a cost, that it's going to unlock the ability for you to film in manual exposure. But with that being said, let's make sure that just wasn't like a hip shot reaction. Let's take a look at this other one. Again, 8K 30 here. Pretty great. Sky looks wonderful. Again, same kind of commentary. Great imagery coming out of this. Great color coming out of this. Remember, this thing also shoots at 10-bit, so if you do have any color issues, you're going to be easily able to adjust that in post with some really cool color grading and make it look basically like you want. But I mean, with these shots right here, let's see if we get another one of those clouds. If not, I'll reverse it a little bit. I mean, that's a pretty incredible scene in general, and it does a good job in the sky. This is again an area that I am very familiar with, and knowing what it looks like with the naked eye, this looks pretty incredible. This one's tracking a motorbike. I think this is actually in 60 frames per second, and this will just give us a good idea. I mean, the guy's on a motorbike, and this thing is doing a really good job. And yeah, I can't say anything more about the tracking there, and you can see the way it looks. Obviously, we're following this. We're not seeing the actual footage yet. I don't think we will, but this is going to at least give you an idea of how this thing keeps up with this motorbike. Now, I will assume that it's just a second one flying. I don't really know. Yeah, it definitely is, because I can see that jerk. Oh, notice right there. Right there is a great example of why I think you should probably buy this drone. Watch it go by this tree. See, it knew right there. See how it's veering off there to the left? Back it up just a little bit here and see that again. Now it's going to fly into this area right here, and it's going to sense that it's in trouble. Well, it kicks back to the left. That would have been done day, game over with the Neo. So again, this is just illustrating my point. The other thing too is this guy's not going slow, I would say, especially bike speed. I think this is something that would keep up with a pedal bike very easily. So it is rocking back and forth quite a bit in that wind. It looks like if this is being filmed by another Neo, I can only assume that it is. Well, it doesn't seem to affect it too much. But overall, in terms of just commenting on the tracking and keeping up with this guy, that's pretty darn good work. Okay, this is a slow-mo, so now we're going to be shooting in 4K 120, auto follow sequence. Let's take a look to see what this looks like in terms of the slow-mo. Again, color spot on. So far, so good. I always look for those little micro stutters and stuff in high FPS films, but so far pretty impressive. Remember, this is 124K. Again, the Neo is only kept at 60 and 1080. So again, another area of the park I'm very familiar with. Looks like a super fun time going in switch. Let's get it, dog. Let's see what the drone does as it flies over the kicker. Over the kicker, clear the table. There is yeah, very nice, very nice. Little stutters right there that I noticed, but overall, again, goodness, am I becoming a fanboy, boys? No, please don't say I'm becoming a fanboy. All right, last thing, we're gonna have to skip around this one. This is the Guy DSLR trailers that supposedly has a X1 Pro Max. Here's some footage. It's good to sit back and watch. The reason I'm just really on the fence whether this is real or not. So again, temper this with actual footage. This could just be someone that's trying to get views or trying to play you for a fool. But if this is in fact the footage, looks really good. I mean, that to me, that shot, yeah, this shot doesn't look that great. The shot before looked pretty good, almost looked like a Mavic. Yeah, that looks pretty good too. Yeah, I just don't know if I can really say. This is the first time I'm seeing this footage in its entirety. I saw a lot of the beginning part of it. But as I kind of look through this, I'm just not sold that this is the footage. But if it is, let's go ahead and assume that this guy isn't being deceptive. Again, we're just seeing stuff that to me that looks on par with the Mavic. Really, really good footage here. Looks great. A lot of countryside stuff. Let's see if we can get to anything of interest. I thought these shots were pretty good. Seeing as the first one of the building was that good from the beginning of it. But yeah, overall, if this truly is the shot, I don't have it in full screen. I should give you the last few minutes in full screen. Color's great. Pretty rad, guys. Pretty cool, man. Yes, sir. Actually, let me go back real quick. This is a cool shot. Really cool shot. All the great things you can do, and this person clearly is traveling a lot of different places, probably folds it in half, puts it in his pocket. Such a win for them. Again, I hate to sound like there isn't a place for the DJI Neo. There certainly is. But seeing this footage, this should give you a great idea of what we can expect to come out of this tiny little wonderful thing. If you can afford it, and it does end up being like the footage I showed you, well, if you've got the money, boys, I'll stand firm on what I said in my last video. This is probably going to be a huge win, but you're going to pay for it. But overall, I am very, very jazzed about this footage, especially seeing all the snow footage, boys. I'm ready to be on my snowboard. If you like this kind of thing, please, please, please help me out. Drop a like. Anyways, I'm Hill Phantom, and I'll see you next time.